When I was a kid, we were taught that the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. The other day, I read that they went extinct 66 million years ago. Imagine my shock to find out somehow a million years went by in the span of, 30 some years? Now, of course, I know a million years didn't go by in the span of 30 years or so. So what happened? Basically, it's because of so-called advancements in dating techniques and new geological evidence. But it's not even worth looking up the specifics to me because I'm not convinced they ever knew what they were talking about in the first place. The problem for me isn't just how they date events like this. This isn't just about the dinosaurs. It's about pretty much what we would now call most of prehistory. You've probably heard the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and the dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago, and humans first appeared around 750,000 years ago. These kinds of dates are reached by geologists and paleontologists dating them using scientific dating methods like radiocarbon dating. The problem with this is the lens they view all of that data through. The lens they view the data through is called uniformitarianism. Scottish geologist James Hutton developed the concept of uniformitarianism in the 1700s. Uniformitarianism is a geological concept that proposes that the same natural processes and physical laws that operate today have been consistent throughout Earth's entire history. It suggests that geological changes occur gradually over long periods of time. This is as opposed to the concept of catastrophism, which suggests geology is shaped by sudden catastrophic events. Instead, uniformitarianism suggests erosion and sedimentation are slow and continuous processes. In other words, uniformitarianism suggests the present is the key to the past. Or rather, the rate of decay and speed of erosion we see happening today is the same rate of decay and speed of erosion that there's always been since the very beginning, all the time, everywhere. The problem with this is there's no way to know that. There isn't any way to know if present conditions have always been the same throughout the entire history of Earth. There is no scientific test you can do that shows all conditions and rates of decay and erosion were the same as they are now in some other epoch of time. The only way to know the conditions of a time period is to live in that time period and experience it. But geologists like James Hutton and later on James Playfield and Charles Lyell came up with the idea that conditions now must be the same conditions there have always been, and then they just decided to roll with it. Other than there isn't any way to know if it's true, I'd say one of the most obvious problems with this view is because of actual catastrophic events. You know, kind of like the other geological concept I mentioned earlier called catastrophism. The one that says geology is shaped by sudden catastrophic events. I mean, the one thing catastrophism has going for it as a concept is the fact actual catastrophic events do happen. Volcanoes erupt, floods happen, sometimes meteorites hit Earth. We have events like this recorded as history throughout recorded history, and stuff like this can still happen in the present day. Things like volcanic eruptions can disrupt the results of radiometric dating tests done in the area around the eruption, which would suggest that they could also disrupt any results from past eruptions, especially ones that occurred in prehistory and were never recorded. I imagine something that was once on dry land, then underwater for a long time, then maybe on dry land again for a long time, might erode at a different rate from what it would have eroded if it stayed on dry land its entire existence. Another possible problem is, to use the dinosaurs as an example again, how did they get to grow so big? Is it possible conditions on the Earth at that time were different and allowed creatures to grow much larger than they can grow today? Could those conditions that have allowed that also caused rates of decay to be different than they are now? I don't know, but just something to think about. The problem with viewing radiometric dating method test results through the lens of uniformitarianism is it requires knowing the half-life of whatever isotope they're measuring is, and assuming its half-life has always been the same all the time, everywhere. There isn't any way to know that, and in fact, they kind of already know that isn't true. Scientists Ephraim Fishbach and Jer Jenkins found solar activity in the distance between the Earth and the Sun can cause variances in the rate of decay of isotopes silicon-32 and chlorine-36. The deviation from the normal rate is small, but that's beside the point. The point is, it was long thought decay rates are always constant, but turns out they're not. If the sun has an effect on decay rates, what else might? How can you account for variances in the decay rates if you can't be sure what all might have an effect on them? I don't think you can. So when I see dates reported that are based on radiometric dating test results, I usually don't put much stock in that. I'm not saying that doing such tests have no value at all. I just don't think they are that reliable for anything in the distant past. Fortunately, during recorded history, people who lived in different times did write down stuff about how life was at their time and things that happened. So I think radiometric dating probably is pretty accurate for things that have happened in recent history. I've said before, I view the accuracy of radiometric dating methods as being kind of like a shotgun blast. Pretty accurate for stuff in, say, the last few hundred years, but then gradually gets less accurate the further back in time you go, with the accuracy rate being kind of akin to a shotgun blast, spreading out the farther it flies through the air. So with all that said, uniformitarianism is just a lens to view data through. It's kind of like how creationists view the data through the lens of creationism. Creationists view it through the lens of Earth only being around 6,000 years old because they read the first part of the book of Genesis literally, which, just to clarify, is not a view that was always an agreed-upon view held by all Christians through history. There were Christian debates on how old the Earth was since the days of the early Church Fathers, on through the Middle Ages and beyond. I talk about that some in another video, I'll link in the description. I think the modern creationism movement is something that is probably at least partially born out of just being in opposition to the uniformitarianism movement in science, which really isn't just limited to geology and paleontology, but also enters into evolutionary biology. Creationists would view the scientific data through their lens of a world that is only 6,000 years old, as opposed to academic establishment types who decided to view it through a lens made up by some guy in the 1700s that says the world's conditions and processes have always been the same. As for me, I'm not trying to fit the entire history of the Earth into 6,000 years, but I'm also not going to assume that present conditions are the key to the past conditions in all epochs of time everywhere. As far as dating things go, I'm much more comfortable with dates suggested by pottery or architecture that matches the styles of pottery or architecture from known periods of time, or even just going by dates written down by ancient authors, especially when more than one ancient author writes down the same date, or at least a similar date for an event. Of course, this only works when you have actual written records of history. So this is why I take the dating of prehistoric finds in the distant past with a grain of salt. I'm sure most of the people dating prehistory with their radiometric dating methods think they are accurate, but I don't think they are, and I don't think it really matters. I don't know if the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago or 65,000 years ago. Why does it matter? It was obviously a long time ago, and this isn't some subtle way of trying to make the dinosaurs coexist with humans. What I'm saying is if they can't definitively date the dinosaur extinction because they can't definitively date anything in prehistory, then that would also mean they couldn't definitively date when the first human appeared either. If you need to believe dinosaurs and humans didn't coexist, you can still believe that. If you need to believe dinosaurs and humans did coexist, then you can still do that too. Me? I don't know. What difference does it make? Is the present going to be somehow different if they did coexist or they didn't? The only thing I know is that the dinosaurs don't exist now, but they did sometime in the distant past because their bones have been found. I'm not proposing any new way to date prehistory here. I don't know of a better way. I don't know if there is a better way. I'm not saying I know how old the Earth is or when the dinosaurs went extinct or when the first human appeared. I'm just saying they don't know either. Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.